Hi, it's Mr. Hammer. I'm back again for lesson number 2 here. We're going to be talking about in section 8.1 how we can relate fractions to decimals and to percents. And by the end of this section, you should comfortably be able to go from fractions to decimals, and then from decimals to percents, or from percents back to decimals, and decimals back to fraction, and be comfortable moving between all of those different areas. Let's look at this one page here. This talks about the fact that we see percent everywhere. And the question here is, what do you know from looking at each picture? We see a picture that might say satisfaction, 100% guaranteed. And what does that mean? Then we have election, 49% of voters are undecided. Exclamation mark, as if that's a big deal. St. Andrew's Hospital said 85% of their goal was achieved. So what do these numbers really mean? Well, 100%, most of us should understand that means everything, the total amount, 100%. So it means if you had a scale of 0 to 100, you would be 100% satisfied. You would be at the top, or totally satisfied, and we would assume if we weren't, we'd get our money back. For this one here, 49% is close to 50, so we're finding out that in this election here, half of the people don't know what they're going to vote, don't know who they're going to vote for, which in an election is a pretty big deal. Over here, this hospital reached 85% of their goal. Well, is that good? Is that bad? We generally think of anything above 70 or 80% as good out of 100. Think about your marks. So percentages have meanings. Beyond those meanings, we need to be comfortable moving between percentages and decimals and fractions so we can better understand how they work. So let's look over here. Now, percent can be written as a fraction, and a percent can also be written as a decimal. And what we're going to be doing here is looking at number lines to see how that can help us understand how they work. So in this example here, we have 25%. We know that that equals 25 over 100, which we covered this in our skills section, and that's also equal to 0.25. So on our number line here, we're going to have fractions on the top. We're going to have decimals in the middle, and we're going to have percentages here at the bottom. I'm just going to write percent. And on the left, we're going to have, notice they are all 0. And on the right, we have what's equivalent to 100. So 100% as a repetition here of what we said before is equal to 1 as a decimal, the number 1. And I think that's the hardest concept when it comes to percents and decimals to grasp. How could 100% equal 1? And I think you have to think of items here. So I have these 2 erasers here. The total amount of erasers that I have here would be considered 100%, and therefore equal to 1. If I took away one of these erasers, I have 50% of what I had before, or 0.5. If you think of a pizza, if I have 10 pieces, that's a whole pizza. That is one pizza, or 100% of the pizza. So always remember that 100% is equal to the number 1. And also, as a fraction, 1 is equal to any number divided by itself. But because we want fractions to be over 100 so that we can work with percent easier, we always put our fractions here generally over 100. So where does the 25% fit in? Well, we kind of know that around here is halfway, and 25% is going to be halfway between 0 and half. So 25% would be here, 0.25 would be here, and 25 over 100 would be here. Now you can put it into simplest terms, and that would be 1/4. Let's look at the next part here. So we can also turn around and go the other way. Instead of going from a fraction to a decimal, we can go from a decimal, or a percent to a decimal, we can go from a decimal to a percent. So we started with 0.5 here. Get my pen up here. And we can say, well, 0.5 equals 15 over 100, and that's going to be equal to 15%, because we've got our 0 here, we've got our 100 over 100 over here. We know 50 over 100 is going to be somewhere over here, and that means 15 is going to be around here. and then 15% will be around that same line, down the line, and 0.15 will be right here. I'm just gonna change my pen thickness, it's a little too thick. To write a fraction as a percent, we're gonna first write that fraction, as we discussed earlier, with a denominator of 100. For example, we're going to take 1/2 here, and we're going to recognize that if we multiply the denominator by 50, we get 100 over here, which is what we want. And then we'll also multiply the numerator by 50. They have to be multiplied by the same number. That gives us 50 over 100. And anytime you have a number, I'm just going to reiterate this, over 100, the numerator becomes the percent number. 50 over 100 is therefore 50%. And in terms of the number line, there is 50%, there is 0.5, and there is 50 over 100. Now 3 over 2 is a special case. 2 times 50 is going to give us 100. 3 times 50 will be 150. So now we're larger than 1. So here's 1 or 100%. We're going an extra 50% beyond right over here. Let's go to the next section here. Here's where things get a little complicated. We've got to get comfortable with decimals. And here's one major tip here for us to get started. When you have a decimal that has 3 digits after the decimal point, we can write it as a fraction with denominator 1,000. So, for example, if I have the number 0.231, I can write that as 231 divided by 1,000. And the reason is very simple. 231 over 1,000 literally means 231 divided by. That line means divided by. Any number divided by 1,000 means you have to move the decimal over 3 spaces to the left, 1 for every 0. So if we had 231 and we divide it by 1,000, which is what this is showing, the decimal starts here, we would move it 1, 2, and 3 spaces right there. So this shows you that any number, anytime you have 3 digits after to the right of the decimal, you can simply put that number over 1,000. Going to clear the page and show a couple other examples. Any number at all. So 0.999, that simply equals 999 over 1,000. 0.129 is the same as 129 over 1,000. Now you might ask, how does that help us when it comes to fractions? Well, that's simple. Just looking for my eraser here. So when it comes to fractions, we want to get our number over 100. So if it's divided by 1,000, all we need to do is divide our numerator by 10 and our denominator by 10, and that's going to change this to 99.9 over 100. And so now we know that this is 99.9%. Okay, and in this case here, we took a number that we couldn't multiply, 5 over 8. 8 does not multiply by any whole number to get to 100. So we took a calculator, we got 0.625. We knew that any number with 3 digits after the decimal point can be put over 1,000. Then we divided the top by 10 and the bottom by 10, and that gave us 62.5 over 100, which is going to be 62.5. Sorry, that dividing was up here. I was dividing up here by 10. Both of these were divided by 10. And finally, our last example here, we're going to go through to our solution page, which is here. Write each percent as a fraction and as a decimal. So I believe it starts with 75%. Let's see, here's our solution. So 75%, we know that equals to 75 over 100, which equals to 0.75. We know that 9% equals 9 over 100, or 0.09. 130% is 130 over 100, which is equal to 1.3. And here's what it looks like on a number line. So again, we have our decimals here. I'm just going to write decimal. We have, oops, my mistake. See, even perfect teachers make mistakes. We're going to start with fractions here on the top, decimals here, and percentages here on the bottom. We start by putting 0, 0, 0. For fractions, we have 100% is equal to 1.0 is equal to 100 of 100. The 75 is going to go here about 3/4 of the way up. The 0.09 or 9 over 100 goes right over here because it's very small. And 130% because it's larger than 1 is going to go over here. Now one question some people say in this case is how can we have 130%? On your test you can get a maximum of 100%. In terms of your effort, you get 100% as your ceiling. Well, here's a very simple example. If you have a stock, let's say you've got Apple computers, their stock is selling at $50 right now. If we call that our baseline, that's our starting point, we would be saying that that $50 is 100% of the stock value. Well, what happens if the stock value goes up to 100? Well, right now we are at 200%. The stock value has doubled. So it has gone up 200% compared to its original stock prices. So in stocks, for example, it is common to see percentages in the 200, 300, 400%, and that indicates companies that are doubling, tripling, or quadrupling their stock values. That brings us to the end of this lesson, and you should check and you can see and follow along with the homework for section 8.1.